Welcome to the Soulbound Studios podcast. I'm your host, Mandy. I'm a certified therapeutic art life coach, and I'm currently in school to become a licensed art therapist one day. Here, we dive deep into the world of creative arts, exploring passions, facing fears, finding inspiration, and pursuing self-development. Whether you're looking to discover a new hobby or turn a beloved pastime into a full-blown passion, this podcast is for you. We're all about empowering women to take charge of their lives and follow their dreams. Join us every single Sunday for a new episode, and be sure to connect with our incredible community of like-minded women. Let's start this creative journey together. You guys, I am so excited to introduce to you a new friend of mine. We have been talking about so many beautiful things about our arts and newfound interest in crystals and healing, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So I'd love to introduce you guys to Therese. She is an empowerment coach and she's an artist, and her and I are vibing. So Therese, thank you so much for being on this podcast today.
Yes, thank you, Mandy. I'm loving the conversations. We could literally talk for hours. So
I feel like
I'm
every
excited for this.
conversation we have could be recorded and made its own podcast.
We would have like 5 podcasts already.
We want to just make our own. Like, let's host one together.
That's a good idea. But
It
I'm so
is.
excited to be here with you. And I love talking with other artists because art is such a huge part of my life. And it's not something that I've had a real chance to talk with other people about. And partly because of the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is, I'm going to let you discuss that. But I'm really excited to do this with you.
I'm really excited too, because when we were, so just for our listeners to give them a little insight, when we were talking about what we should talk about, it was intended to be a 15-minute Zoom call just to kind of get to know each other a little bit. And I think we talked for what, 2 hours, an hour and a half?
I think so.
We're like, all right, well, I think this could work.
You're like, I have to go, but I want to keep talking. And I'm like, I know.
I could just talk to you forever. So anyways, we'll try to stay on topic, but I just think that with you, especially in the way that we vibe, we can just let the conversation flow naturally. We kind of have an idea of what we want to talk about, which I think a lot of it has to do with imposter syndrome, but it's, we kind of outlined some different topics. So just to kind of spout them out in a list format real quick, and then we can dig into each of them. This podcast is going to be on like why we feel like the comparison trap and feeling qualified to call ourselves an artist, or whatever it is, whatever field you're in. Why do we have to wait for some kind of permission to feel qualified to call yourself an artist? Then we might dip into trusting yourself and achieving goals. Like, how can you actually allow yourself to do the things you want to do with your life? It's like goal setting and dreaming.
Yeah.
And also the mindset around these titles and these achievements. So those are the 3 kind of categories that we've outlined. But let's just start right off the top. Therese, why do you think that there's some like common reasons why people compare themselves to others, especially in creative fields?
Oh, this is I think that art is really personal. It is an expression of your soul. And there is a real vulnerability in not just making art, which I think is probably one level. I never had that vulnerability around making the art because art was such a necessary part of my own sort of sanity and healing growing up. I grew up when I was young, there was domestic violence in the house and I needed a place to escape. And once we were sort of out of that situation and my mom had married another person, he was very psychologically abusive and emotionally abusive. And art, again, was where I went to sort of feel safe and have a safe space in a world that was loving and colorful and beautiful and full of possibility. And so I've never felt vulnerable around making art. But when it came to sharing that, as you can see, as you can hear, there is a lot of vulnerable, personal, it's your world being expressed. It's an internal world being expressed externally. And so we feel very protective of that. And then we're also in an age right now where everybody is able to share what they're creating, and we are sharing what we're creating, which is, I think it's beautiful. I think it's a good thing, but it also brings up, like you were saying before, imposter syndrome and the comparison, because once our art is sort of outside of our body and in front of us, there's a sort of desire to sort of protect it and feel, like, I love this. But as soon as you see that, like, for example, let's say you're making a figure. I love to do like faces and figures and things like that. And you look at it and it's never quite what it's in your head, right? Especially if your skill set isn't quite there yet. It's like you have the idea, you know what looks good, but your skills haven't quite caught up to your vision.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see someone else's who's locking in the skill set that you want, and it's very easy to like immediately slam yourself and tell yourself I'm not good enough and there's just no way, and feel sort of a shame around something that's very vulnerable. And then going to share it can feel even scarier. So what if you do share it, and what if the comments come back? And that I've shared work before where people, I think their intentions were good, but they were already like critiquing and telling me how I could fix it. And it's not always like your intention isn't always to get the critique or, to have someone help you fix it. You just want to share something that you put time, effort, energy, and your soul into. And so there is this, it's a catch 22 situation to be an artist right now, because it's such a time of, um, it's so easy to share it with the world, which is such a blessing. And at the same time, you are making yourself almost feel more vulnerable, or at least that's how it feels for me. And so I think that does really kick up the imposter syndrome, because again, then you're looking at, well, why are they good? And then you might read their bio and you see all the things that they've done and achieved, and you think that, okay, in order to reach that level of skill, I also have to do that. And then all the stories that can come up from that. And that's just maybe from my perspective. I'm sure that there are so many ways that this imposter syndrome or this feeling of not enough can evolve. And usually the core of it really is a deeper feeling of not feeling enough. And just it's coming out through the art right now. It's not necessarily connected just to the art, but it's being felt through your art, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot. So I love hearing other people's perspective on this, because you approached it in a more like your art is your soul. And I would say that I'm just now, after 7 years of painting, I am just now, 8 years actually of painting. I'm just now starting to create art for me, art that I want to create. Because when
Yeah.
I very first started, the very first painting I ever did was a gift for someone else. And then I posted that online, and other people hired me to paint for them. And then other people hired me to paint for them. And I'm always
Mm.
in this trap of doing commissions for other people. And even when I did them, I, people may have raved about them, they may have loved them, but I didn't feel, it's that vision in your head of what you think it's going to be, and then it doesn't turn
Yes.
out on paper.
Yes.
And so I just kept showing up, and I can see a progress in skill. But then I shift, because the commissions got so draining doing art for other people all the time. It started as an entrepreneurial journey. It really did. And I mean, I guess we'll go back into the deeper reason of why I started it. But the very first watercolor painting I did was for someone else. And then it just kept transforming into that. And then I shifted over into teaching art. And again, that felt like I was doing it for other people. I
Mm.
was teaching for other people. And so for years, I've always felt the art was never my own. But the reason, here's now why I got into art, is I went through this really awful postpartum depression. And when it was the thick of it, I had coloring books. Like, I have them all in my other room, but stacks and stacks of coloring books that I leaned into. And it was still someone else's guided, coloring books, but with positive messages in them and affirmations. And I think that was the first time in my life where I experienced art as a form of therapy. Before I even knew that art therapy was a thing, I was dipping into the world of art for myself. And then when I was like, okay, I really like art, what can I do with this? my brain was constantly on, I'm always on this entrepreneurial kick. And so,
Yeah.
and at the time when I found this love for art, people said I was good at it. So I was like, okay, well, let me try to sell it. And it just turned into this. I was always painting for other people, when the root of it, I found art because my soul needed it. And I don't feel until just now at this point in my life, the universe is aligned for me to be able to create art in the capacity that I want to. And, I had this kind of, every morning I sit out on my porch with my coffee and my dog, and I just watch the birds and the squirrels. And this morning I went and laid down on the ground and like grounded myself to the earth and felt the energy, like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Just feel the
Yeah, I
energy
love
of the
that.
earth and I allowed all the negative to sink into the ground and let the earth absorb it and take it from me, and just kind of like had that mindset. And when I was laying there in the grass and I was looking up at the tree above me, I had this thought. It was like, we get this feeling that if our art isn't a photorealistic painting or drawing of something, that it's not good. That's
It's
not the
well, I
freaking
feel
case.
like there's a sort of like maybe group consensus. It's not spoken, but maybe there is a group consensus that the ability to do photorealistic art is a marker of talent,
Mhm.
when really I would say it's a marker of skill. Well, I put those two in a different category because skill can be acquired and learned, and talent is something that's sort of inherent. And it doesn't mean that if you have skill, you don't have talent. It's just that there's a different energy. The talent part is a little different. It's more like a relationship to it, right? Like I have a deep relationship to art. I have a deep relationship to color. Lines excite me. Blank paper, like, is my, like, you give me a blank sketchbook as a gift, and I'm like, this is the greatest gift you can ever give me, right? Like sharpened pencils turn me on. I don't know what it
You get off in the office supply section.
You do. You're like, anytime there's a stationery store, I'm like, like there's this weird energy around paper and supplies. I could be the happiest camper if you like, take me to an art store and I'm just so happy, right? So I feel like the talent is the relationship, if that makes any sense, because there's a magnetic pull to your craft, if that makes sense. Where skill is, you can develop skill. I could learn how to woodwork a chair. I don't have a talent for it. I don't have, you can't take me to Home Depot and get me excited about wood or jigs, or I don't even like wood glue. I'm not sure what you need for the chair, but I don't have that personal relationship to it. But I could develop the skill. I could develop the skill for cooking. Now there are people who, they geek out when they go to William and Sonoma, or they learn a new recipe. I'm like, it's a talent. So it's an energy versus the skill, which is the ability to do it.
I think there's also different levels. So one of my favorite book, it's my favorite book, all-time favorite book, is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Mm,
And it is in that book, she talks about, we put so much pressure on finding our thing. What's our purpose? Like what's our one thing? And well, first of all, there never has to be one thing.
right.
I I take this mentality around it as like, find something that you're just a smidge bit curious about, and dig into it a little deeper. And that's kind of what my whole 365 challenge that I'm doing right now is, find something that you're slightly curious about. Gardening, music, dancing, whatever the hell that thing is, reading, journaling, whatever you feel your soul needs and you're just a little bit curious about and you wish you showed up for yourself a little bit more, dig into that.
I
Like,
love
and I
that.
think if you show up for yourself in that way and you want to learn more about gardening, and your only thing is that every day I'm just going to go spend time with my flowers, because it's the relationship with the curiosity. It's, you know what I mean? I've actually started, when I talk about my art, I've started capitalizing the A as it's a proper noun, because it's a time with an important person, thing, energy in my life.
Mm,
Elizabeth Gilbert does that in her book with, like, when she talks about feelings, it's fear is an actual energetic being that goes along on every single journey that you're with. Creativity and inspiration, they never asked for pressure to be put on them. They just asked for a little bit of fun time with you. they
Yeah.
they never asked for that pressure. And so if you start thinking about these energies in as a physical being, and this time that you're spending developing that curiosity around them, you're just getting to know that person in your life a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so
I love it.
when I'm over here talking about my time with art, it's a person. It's an important part of my life that I want to spend more time with. And so I started capitalizing art as a proper noun because it's a person in my world.
I
And
love that. Yeah,
yeah,
I love the personification is a tool that works for me as well. And I like to use it whenever I'm doing healing work. I like to sort of personify if there's fear. I like to try and get to know it and talk to it as if it's a person and have a relationship to it so I can understand its point for being there. So I absolutely understand and love that. And kind of taking what I said about talent being more of a relationship and what you're talking about, I hope that listeners can hear you can actually develop a talent for something by being in relationship with it. I think that again, I would encourage people to sort of separate talent and skill because so many people refuse to start something because they tell themselves they're not talented. And again, it's a love relationship. The more you fall in love with it, the more this talent develops in you. I could fall in love with woodworking or chair making, and I could develop a talent for it. The skill is learning the sort of ABCs of it, if you will, right? So the talent is I'm a writer, for example, but you have to learn how to read and you have to learn how to construct sentences. These are the skills that you hone to become a great writer. And when it comes to art or painting and specifically, the talent is in the relationship. Like I love paint, I love color, I love mixing them, I like seeing what happens. I love when I'm not painting, I'm looking at colors. Like when I look at the sky, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Why is it beautiful? I'm curious about it. And I want to think about like, if I go for hikes in the woods, there's so many beautiful wooded areas. I live in the Pacific Northwest. So we have tons of woods, but I look at how the light comes through the trees and I think about how I would capture that. That's the relationship to art right there. And the skill is the part I think a lot of people get hung up on, or they that's where they hold themselves apart because they don't understand how the function of it. Neither did I. And one of my hangups around comparison was I didn't go and get a formal education in this. I had an opportunity to do it, but I turned it down to focus on my acting career. And ever since then, I felt a sort of, I don't know if it's shame or guilt, maybe more shame or embarrassment or something that I didn't pursue it. So I wasn't allowed to say to the world that I'm an artist, even though I've been technically selling my artwork since I was in sixth grade. It started in sixth grade. I made stationery and I would sell it on the playground for 25 cents, like a little sheet in an envelope that matched that had a little drawing on them and sell it on the playground. And I was so, I'm entrepreneurial as well. I was making money super early. And I remember like coming home with like, I don't know, like $20 in quarters because I was selling art on the
that's a hustle, man. And I love that. My daughter is going into sixth grade right now, and she keeps talking about, Mom, can I open my own babysitting business? Can I do a lawn, like go mow lawns? Can I sell art online? Like, and I was like, if you want to sell art online, girl, I got you.
Yes. My
And
daughter as
so,
well. I mean, so yeah, it's definitely something in the blood, right? Like there's just this
yeah.
desire to monetize or to profit from the work that you do. But it's so funny that even I look back and I'm like, why haven't I? It was years ago when I finally claimed it that I was a professional artist, but that was after selling over 100 paintings and still being like, no, I'm still working on that. I can't claim that I haven't earned it. I'm not hanging in a gallery somewhere, right? I don't have an agent. So I had all these limits in my mind about what it meant to be a professional artist. And I was totally denying. It wasn't just, I wasn't claiming, there was sort of a denial of who I was. And I'm certainly not saying you have to be professional to be an artist, by the way. So I want to make that really clear for anyone who's listening who might not ever feel a need to sell their art, but wants to feel like they're a part of this community. If you love art, you're a part of this community. The end, right? Like that's, you are a part of it. That's an artist. An artist, I feel like one of the first things we develop is an eye. Mm-hmm. We develop our eye before the other skills come in. You know what's beautiful. You know what touches you. You know what inspires your soul. These are the attributes that I would say make up an artist, is that connection to, can you find beauty in just what you're looking at right now? What is beautiful? What touches you? And again, beauty doesn't necessarily have to be what's aesthetically pleasing, but what touches your soul.
100%. And it gives me so many different ideas to do with my kids. Like they have all these paintings that they want to, like that they do. And it's like, how can I encourage this artist mindset in them? Because there's some point we all create as kids. Like we all draw pictures and we all paint and we all like love to create these rainbows and these butterflies and these beach scenes are all things that my 8-year-old has painted this week. And we always have this innate ability as children. And there's some point, and I think it might be the school system, just saying, but at some point we navigate away from that. And then all of a sudden our adult brains think that we're not an artist. When there's a quote, and I don't remember who said it. It used to be on my wall in my home in Texas. Every child is an artist. And it's not, I don't think that's exclusive to children. Yes, I do believe every child is an artist, but at what point do we stop believing that we are? Like there's some point in this
systematically, it's systematically sort of, I mean, look at what happened with the school system and how art was the first thing that was reduced, right? Art programs were pulled, and not just, I mean, we're talking about painting, music, anything that stimulates the right hemisphere, which is where the artist lives. It doesn't live in the analytical side, which is what is usually sort of promoted or worked on. We're celebrated for being logical. We're celebrated for being strategic or analytical or very left hemisphere, which is a closed system. It serves its purpose, but God gave us two hemispheres. We were given a whole brain, but we're taught to live in half the brain. Whereas in the right hemisphere, this is where the abstract comes in. This is where we are affected by color. It's also where the spiritual aspect, how we connect spiritually to other realms. I mean, the work that I also do is I'm also a psychic medium and a channel, and all of it's happening over here in this artistic side. And it's the same place I go when I paint. And a lot of times, the reason I call myself an intuitive artist is I'm getting messages and I'm just putting it down on the paper. And a lot of times it's not clear what it is until it's done. And I look at it and I start asking questions, and then all this information starts coming up. So it is one of the forms of communication that we have. And it's one of the earliest forms of communication. It's a nonverbal form of communication and understanding and connection and trying to express what's going on inside and what's coming out. It's so interesting because, of course, being an artist, my two children are also artists because we have art time and we have family time where we put on music, we sit down, and we're all drawing. It's so interesting to see what both of them express at an early age, where my daughter was gravitating more towards color and shape. My son was gravitating towards line, and she would do sort of bigger, less detailed shape, and he would do very intricate lines. I mean, it was something where I was like, whoa, your brain definitely interprets and sees things different than mine. And he'd get all these little monsters coming out in his work. So it was like always line art, always monsters, always like scenarios happening. And then over here with my daughter now, it's characters, right? She's very much into character development. What are they called? Original characters. So she calls them OCs. She's like, this is my new OC.
Oh my God, that's so cute. How old is she?
She's 13.
Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah. So she's
That's
into the OCs, she's making her characters, and she's practicing like the same thing I remember doing at that age, which is eyes, loving to draw eyes. Eyes are the windows to the soul, right? So there's very much there's a lot of symbology, and our right hemisphere connects to our subconscious mind. And so it really is our nonverbal soul self trying to speak to us through a type of expression, which is why the work that you're doing and bringing the therapy aspect into it is so critical, because it is a way to contact the deeper information that lives inside of us and make sense of it, make sense of what's going on when we don't understand, why am I feeling this intense feeling? I don't understand where it comes from. The art is a way to access the nonverbal parts of ourselves that are holding that emotional intelligence and bring it out for you to see. So it's very personal, very vulnerable. And at the same time, we're also taught that it gives us a value if you do it well. You
Mhm.
have more value if you're good at it, right? But if you're not good at it, don't show it to anyone because that's so embarrassing.
And how dare you if you decide you just want to throw paint at a canvas? Oh, well, my toddler can do that. So that's not,
Oh
excuse
yeah.
me. I freaking hate that so much. It's like, don't, especially because, okay, there's a quote. Woo, my brain just went on like I had 17 thoughts all at one time. Let me take this back. No one, if they're in the arena performing, if they're actually doing the thing, no one else that's on that same level where they're in the arena performing and showing up for the things that they love doing and actually working towards something, no one on that level will ever put you down for the things you're doing. Right? It's
That's
here. It's
right.
you and I. We will never do that. But the
I am
people
so
that are in
supportive of it.
yeah, people that are in the audience, those are the people that boo. The people that
Yes.
are in the comments are the people that talk shit. Except for I had this beautiful comment today from a brand new follower that I just loved. She came in and the very first interaction we had was good energy. And I was like, that's the people I want in my corner. Like, if you're
There's
not
a good
bringing
chance she's out putting herself out there, though. There's a good chance that even if it's not
this,
about art alone, she is probably doing the work to put herself out there. And it's so true. It's easier to sit back and decide that you're the world's best art critic or critic of anything when you're not risking it. See, when you put not only make the art but also decide, okay, I'm going to put it out there. What you're doing is you're coming from an open-hearted space. You can only have courage when your heart is open. And so you've opened your heart and you're willing to put something out there, which means you're also taking a risk, because the reality is we live in a world where it's 50-50. It's 50% positive, 50% negative. And you kind of know before you put it out there that you're risking somebody absolutely shutting you down. But the point for putting it out there is like coming back to yourself. Why did I do it?
mm-hmm.
Did I do it so I could get the praise? And if that's the reason why, and sometimes we do, come on, let's be honest. I've definitely done that. It's going to hurt when someone attacks it. It's going to hurt because that's why you did it. But if you're doing it because you are so proud of yourself, you're so proud of yourself for taking the time to sitting down, to completing something, to showing up to it, whether it's throwing paint on a canvas or sitting there and taking your time and trying to create a scene, it doesn't matter. You showed up to it. And if your whole thing is like, I just want to celebrate that I showed up, then what they say doesn't really have the same impact on you.
It's so funny because I think that these things all kind of like intertwine. Like they're almost like a giant like DNA strand of like or spider web of sorts where everything's kind of connected, but individually they're all off in their own little world. So like I fucking love Elizabeth Gilbert. I'm gonna always reference her, but I watched an interview with her one time when she's like, as artists, as creators, we have to learn how to separate ourselves from our work because this painting that I did, it's just a thing. It's just a thing. Like my soul felt I needed to create it and it's here and now it's a thing and I can put it out into the world and it's separate from me. So when we call it our baby, yeah, you may have poured a lot of love into it, but it is not it's you have to love it so much that you're not afraid to let it go. But
Mm.
you have to also disconnect yourself from it in a way that you don't hold any personal value in what people think of it, because it's not part of you. It's just a painting that you created. For her, she's like, this is just a book I wrote. Like, people can burn it all they want and it doesn't affect me and my soul. It's just an art form that I put out into the world.
Well, what's interesting is, especially with art that you end up selling or giving to someone, the process was always for you and no one can take that from you, but the painting was always for them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, I love
So
that.
even when, so you talked about doing commissions, and I totally got what you were saying, because the difference between our two journeys there was nothing between me and the art. It was always like the art was there for me, and whatever I created was a result of this deep relationship. When you're doing commissioned work or hired work, like let's say you're licensed or you're doing work for a company, they're in between you and the finished piece, right? There's a buffer in between the two. Um, what was really interesting for me, so I didn't do a lot of commissioned work. I also have that feeling where I get really stagnated when someone gets between me and the art, where I have to like put it through their filter in order to bring it out. It's a little stifling for me, probably because it's been such a close knit, tight
Right.
relationship that when someone else gets in there, I'm like, but when I've made art that was to sell, what was really exciting is it's almost like maybe the day that your child gets married and you realize your child's now with someone else and there was an intention for it all along, like you were doing the work of spirit or source, and you were almost hired by source to bring something through for someone else that they maybe wouldn't express that way, but they absolutely relate,
It's like letting
whatever
your
that.
baby birds fly out of the nest kind of thing. Like,
Exactly.
they were never intended to stay in the nest forever.
Right.
Its purpose was always to fly. Let it fly.
Yes. And so there's something about that relationship where I've always felt like I'm really connected to this other person, even if I've never met him. A lot of my work I sold online, and but many times people would message me who bought it and told me why they bought it. And I've gotten very like personal messages about the significance of the piece. And I just feel like it's another way to be connected to someone like forever. You might not ever talk to them, you might not ever get to see their life or where it ends up being, but you are now a part of their life in a way that you'll be around for a long time. And that's a very sacred feeling for me.
I really love that because it kind of puts into perspective some of the commissions that I've done. And there was a long time where I actually really loved doing them, even though I got burned out because I was always painting for someone else. Everybody always had a story behind the commission they wanted to do. And even when, like, I think of like a gift for someone, a friend of ours they used to live here, they had lost their son. And it was a tragic illness that took their son from
Mm.
this earth. And it hit home because their son was the same age as my oldest daughter. And they were, they worked with my husband at the time. And it was just this beautiful, the art piece that I did for them was a beautiful tribute to their family, to their relationship with God, and the connection that they'll always have. And different commissions that I've done for people of their childhood home. It's all the memories in that home, or it's the place where they got married, or it's all these things. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it because these paintings mean something to someone, and I have the talent to be able to, not necessarily skill, but the talent to be able to take their love and their memories and put it onto paper for them to cherish forever. And there is a beauty in that. As much as it's like, as an artist on my own personal soul, I need to start creating art for me and letting me enjoy the process and let other people as the viewer connect to it in their own way. I do have commissions opened, but I don't think it's something I want to do forever as an artist. I love the connection to people. As an
Yeah.
introvert, I don't like the masses. I like the individuality of meeting people and hearing their story and putting some art behind their story. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think that there's a beautiful connection to art in every single way, as the creator, as the consumer of art.
Well, I think what we're illustrating here is there's something far more important beyond the skill that is often praised, right? We're often praised for the aesthetic beauty or the power or the scale or whatever it is, or, you know, just the technical detail. That's often what's sort of praised and focused on. And as artists, I think we can get caught in that because we want we want those skills. I mean, I don't know of any artist that doesn't want to feel like, yeah, what I had in my head, I was able to clearly articulate on the page or on the canvas or the wood or whatever medium you're using it. I think we all want that because whatever's in our head, the hard part is as an artist, at some point, you're going to have to accept that what you're seeing is you're seeing energy, you're seeing spirit, you're actually seeing a creation that lives in another dimension, if you will. It has a real life, it has fullness and energy there. And we're actually, it's a really great metaphor for this is remember in Willy Wonka, where they had the giant chocolate bar and they wanted to bring it through the TV and they had to shrink it. So the energy that we're trying to convey and bring through as an artist, we have to shrink this big, massive, detailed energy through this very fine funnel and bring it out on the other side. And it's always going to be less than what's in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to make peace with that. It's okay. It's still gorgeous. It's still beautiful. It's still resonant. It's still powerful. It's still meaningful. It's deep. It's just part of the, I guess, ennui as an artist is that you're always going to have this feeling like, yeah, but it could have been more. It's like, of course it could have been more. It had a life on the other side. It's bigger than what you can bring through, but that doesn't mean it isn't as valuable. And I think we have to just come to terms with that, make peace with that. It's always going to be more detail, more depth, more feeling, more accurate on the other side than we feel it comes through here. And I think until we make peace with that, we're always going to be a little harsher on ourselves, maybe a little more critical or judgmental of whatever comes through. And I know that when you're beginning your art process, or let's say you took a long break, I've taken long breaks from art in my life. I mean, years long. I think from college until I had my first child, which was a chunk of time, I really barely was in. I mean, I'd go in there from time to time, but not consistently, not enough. And so you lose skill because your hands, you're tuning them. Your hand-eye coordination is something that's part of the skill set that you have to tune, right? Being able to assess shape and line and color and variation is these are all the skills that have to be tuned. And when you don't use it, it's just like if you were like I used to dance ballet for years and years, and there's a part of me who's like, I could do that again because I've done it before. But when I try to go and do like arabesque or pirouette, I'm like, I'm rusty because I haven't tuned the body to doing it. And skill is about tuning the body. But there is this easy ability to be really harsh on yourself because of that and decide, I'm not an artist. I can't do this. And we deny ourselves permission. Yeah.
This is a perfect segue. I'm so glad you said the word permission because that's what I was trying. I was like, this is such a great segue into this. So the whole thing that you and I had talked about prior to us actually having this conversation now was giving ourselves permission to call ourselves an artist, actually show up and do the work for ourselves.
Yes.
How do we get out of this like, oh, I'm not an artist. Oh, I don't show up consistently. Oh, I'm not any good. How do we get out of that kind of mindset and start stepping into this? You know what? I'm going to give myself permission to have a really shitty first draft painting, or I'm going to give myself permission to just identify as an artist. Like, I don't care what anybody else thinks.
Yeah.
I'm allowing myself to do that now. How do we get out of that awful mindset of this, I'm not good enough, and shift into fuck everybody else and I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to give myself
I was just going to say, can I swear? Because the answer is to say, fuck it. Fuck it.
As you get super close to your mic, you're like, fuck it.
Really got to just say fuck it. Because because this is a limit in the mind. It's a self-imposed limit. No one's actually stopping you. Nobody is stopping. You're stopping you. And I feel like at some point, it's like being on the edge of a high diving board. You went up there because you wanted to go up there. Nobody forced you up. And then you get to the edge of the diving board and you're like, oh my God, it's too high. I can't do this. It's too much. And all the anxiety and the stories come up. And how do you get off the diving board? Well, you either crawl back down, like you can
And
say
feel
no,
defeat.
right, and feel like you've let yourself down because you wanted to be up there, or you have to get up there and you look down and you go, fuck it, and jump, because there's at some point you can't think your way out of this. And that's kind of what I think we get stuck in, is we're in analysis paralysis. We're overthinking it. We're probably dealing with some perfection issues. Could be dealing with comparison. We're stuck in our head, and the only way to get it out there is to do it. And I have learned, like, I got really into sketchbooks. I have had sketchbooks all my life, but I never was devoted to them. They were always a place to practice and do things. And then when I got into them, they became very precious. And so it went from a nothing thing into everything. And I had to find that middle place. And so for me, and I don't know if it's because of perfection or whatever, but I had to get multiple sketchbooks. I'm like, this one's for being crap, and this one is for pretty, and this one's for colors. And I got really into that. Like, I had to separate it because I was being too precious with things. Things got precious. It had to be good. And then what really worked for me, where I started giving myself permission, was when it stopped being about the end result and it was more about the doing it. When I got really into, I'm just going to do it. I mean, I'm going to show up every day. So I started with the 100-day art challenge, which I think is a great one to start with. It feels heavy when you first do it. You're like, oh my God, 100 days. But what I loved about it was my only rule was, didn't have to be good, didn't have to be perfect, didn't even have to be finished, but you had to show up every day. Just show up every day. Just do something. And so there were days where I wanted to show up and I made things and I was like, can't, and I made things to sell. Like, I got stuff made, which was great because I'm like, now I have product. There were other days where I'm like, I don't have time for this. And I'm like, doesn't matter. Pick up a pencil, put a piece of paper down. Or for me, it was grab the iPad. You can do it easily. You can literally watch your TV show because you're so tired, and you don't have to get out paint and water and clean things. You just have to sit there with your iPad and come up with something. And at first, it was a struggle. There were times where the story of I can't do this won more than just show up for yourself. But after a while, you you get traction.
Mm-hmm.
And traction is everything. I mean, traction is what makes it. Now I show up to paint for myself every single day. And even if I'm like, all I can do is paint like some simple ass daisies in my sketchbook in a pretty color palette, I did it. That counts. That definitely counts. And you find that you look forward to it. Now, where it used to be, how do I fit this into my day? Now it's between 8:30 and 10 p.m. is my painting time. Nobody messes with that. It's part of my nighttime ritual, is that between these hours, I am dedicated to painting. Sometimes I can't get it all in that time block, but before I do my nighttime ritual of, I also like dry brush and I take a bath, and it's my whole ritual, but painting is now a part of it. And so what I did is I sort of habit stacked too.
Well,
I
that's the best way to do it.
I found for me that the end of the day was the easiest. That I have, because I'm an entrepreneur and I work for myself, you also have to learn how to put limits on yourself there. When does work stop? Because working until you sleep is not healthy, and not giving yourself you time is also not healthy. So for me, work stops before dinner. As soon as dinner's served, no more work. And then after dinner, it's art time. And if we want to do family movie night, that's great, but I have to get in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Something's got to happen where I feel like I honored this time. And the more I took that, the more that that time was connected to my own mental well-being, which is also very important to me, the more seriously I took it. So it wasn't, I'm not so serious about what I create. I'm serious about the time, and I'm serious about showing up, because these things improve my mental health. They help me be a better wife, a better mom. They help me feel like I'm showing up for myself and I'm honoring myself. They help me feel the permission I've already given myself that I am a professional artist. Even if I don't sell anything anymore, I am still a professional artist because I invest in myself and in this work. If I want to study during that time, it has to be art related. Like I'll watch, I go like on Skillshare, or if I have classes from someone, that gets to be part of the art time. So that's when it happens. But the beautiful thing um, is that the skills naturally develop when you show up to it every day. Like I was sharing with people, I don't know if I could show this to you. Um, so I was sharing my process here with my art, where I was like, I've done this thing where I don't want to waste time sketching right now, even though sketching is important and I'm not dogging sketching, but I just want to start painting. And so what I do is I block in my figure and I just start blocking things in with paint. And it's absolutely okay if what comes out is a little crooked, if the proportions aren't right, because I'm not going for getting it perfect or having that right. I'm going for, can I paint it in without the guidelines? Like, do I trust myself enough that as I put this wash of blue down, it's going to turn into a woman's face, right? And that is a new thing I'm doing with myself, where I'm like, stop worrying about if it's as good or even proportionally correct. Like, trust yourself that if you're looking with your eye and you're willing to experiment, you're going to, like, over time coordinate your hand and eye, and you're going to be able to do it. And it's starting to happen. And I'm just so excited because I've been doing like, this was last night's practice, where these deer, and
Beautiful.
they're just blocked in with paint. There's no sketching. And it's, again, I think it's sort of helping me develop a style, which was something I'm also like obsessed with, was how do I find my style? And
Lisa,
I think,
Lisa Condren, I think is her. Have you heard of that book?
no, what is the book?
Let me go get it.
Oh, yes.
So I used to call this a toxic trait. It is not a toxic trait. It is, I offer unsolicited book recommendations whenever they
I
come to my
love
mind.
it. I love books. So
Um,
please.
it is Lisa Congdon, I think I say it right. And it's called Find Your Artistic Voice, The Essential
I
Guide to
love it.
Working Your Creative Magic.
Love.
So
Yes, I will be
I
looking for that.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's an amazing book. I read it all in one day and I need to go back and study it like thoroughly, but it's a
Love that.
beautiful book. And so there's a couple of things that I kind of want to like touch on that you've also said that I relate to very strongly, because I started this challenge for myself, and I've just been showing up on Instagram Live and inviting other people to join me. And I think it can feel like an overwhelming challenge, because I'm calling it Soul 365. And it's where you
Love
take,
that.
doesn't matter what it is, you show up for it every day. It could be dancing, gardening, whatever it is. I know we kind of already talked about this, but I don't remember if it was before or after we hit record. So I'm going to just say it again.
Love it. Go for it.
But if you show up for something that you're a little bit curious about, and you commit to that thing every day for a year, your whole life around that thing is going to change. You're
For
going to
sure.
find your style. You're going to find your love for something else. You might even find a few weeks into that you don't even like it. But it's about showing up and finding something that you're curious about, and it's showing up for yourself. Because I think, especially as women, especially as mothers, you your whole identity gets wrapped up in, if you're a good mom, you're a good wife, you're a good employee, you're a good artist, you're a good whatever the hell, how other people perceive you. This was something I picked up from Rachel Hollis. I don't know if she got it from somewhere else, but it's this mindset around our worth is not tied up in how other people see you, and how good you are at that thing. Like,
Yes.
your worth needs to be tied up in what you think of yourself. how do you show up for yourself? Are
Mhm.
are are you using your brain to help fuel you, or are you attacking yourself?
Right.
Show up for yourself in the way that you want to. And it might feel like a giant challenge. Like you might be at the base of this Soul 365 or whatever challenge you decide to take on for yourself. And you might feel like you're staring at like Mount Everest and like, how in the world am I going to do this? The only way to freaking do it is to start. Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
That's right. And celebrate when you do it. See, that's the other
Yes.
thing. So, first, what I'm hearing, and this is a great point you're making, self abandonment is something that people might have to address when they're facing, like, why am I not doing the thing I love? Why am I not doing that? Why am I abandoning myself here? And that usually stems from earlier patterns in childhood. It's usually like a trauma response, and you learned that if you did that, it kept you safe, or you got the praise, or you got seen, or whatever it was you needed. But the self abandonment at the time was how you figured out how to get your needs met, because they weren't getting met, and asking for them or having someone acknowledge that you had needs wasn't really happening. So there is a, that key happens over time. Obviously that tactic that we develop for protection or to get our needs met stops working because it's not healthy. And then we don't realize that we're still self abandoning because maybe you are a mom and their needs come first, or you're in a relationship and that you want to nurture that, or your job, or you're building a business, which is a huge one where weirdly you think you're actually you think you're doing it for yourself, but you also self abandon while you're building a business. It's very easy to do it,
Mm-hmm.
very easy. And so a big part of it is, if you're looking at your life and you're like, I really want to garden, but that's selfish. If that's what you're saying to yourself, that's where you kind of can get a hint that, why am I minimizing my own needs here? And why can't I give myself 5 to 10 minutes to do it? 5 to 10 minutes of that. I mean, and again, I think you should give yourself more, but the justification to get yourself out of that is, it's only going to take 5 minutes. I can do that while, like, if I wanted to garden and maybe I wanted to get into it, but it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm trying to get to bed, I could still go on Pinterest and create a gardening board. Like, I could start by pinning things, and that would be the start of taking some time for myself and focusing on this goal and letting it have a place to live. That's just the start, though. It can't just stop there. Obviously, that's not going to get you to you in a garden feeling the joy and contentment of showing up for yourself in the way that you need to. But it's really kind of seeing that if everyone else's needs come before yours, then you are the person on the airplane putting everybody else's oxygen mask on while you're dying. And unfortunately, what happens is you can't get the masks on other people. It doesn't work. That's why on an airplane they say put it on yourself so that you can help another person.
So it's interesting as people are joining me on this Soul 365. They may not be posting about it on social media, but that's never a requirement, right? I do it because it's how I keep myself accountable and how I build a community around the things that I think are important. And that's
Yes.
how I'm doing it. But realistically, I can paint off camera and still have that private sacred studio time. But what I'm finding a very common pattern with the people that are doing this, and mind you, at the time of this recording, I'm on day 8. So this is still a very new thing. By the time that this airs, we're going to be several weeks in. But the pattern, even in the first week, is when, because the tracker that I built, you can track your emotions around when you show up. Do you feel proud of yourself? Are you frustrated? What kind of emotions are you feeling for this?
Mm.
And I have found across the board, the people that are doing it, the times that they feel frustrated around it are the times that that sacred time gets interrupted by someone else.
Interesting.
And it's not actually a frustration with the thing you're doing. It's a frustration because your time, your sacred time to focus on yourself gets interrupted by your kids, or gets interrupted by your husband, or gets interrupted by an important task you've got to get done. And you're like, damn it, this is my time. I'm finally starting to show up for myself. All of you guys,
Yep.
could you just leave me alone for a goddamn minute? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
The time, and it's across the board. Anybody that I've talked to that's actually showing up and doing the thing, yeah, day one, you feel really proud because you did it. But day three, your life is going to try to interrupt. And it's part of the universe saying, are you sure you actually really want to do this? How committed are you to yourself right now? And it's going to challenge you. And
Oh, for sure.
that's a good thing. But that's where the growth lies.
Of course. And it also shows you, how are your boundaries? That's the other thing the universe is saying, is let's check your boundaries. How are
I
they?
love boundaries.
Boundaries are great. And some of us with the abandonment issues and stuff have boundary issues. Again, we're training ourselves to put others' needs ahead of our own, because that's how we felt safe, and that's how we felt like we had our protection. Is if I'm there for you, then you're not going to leave me, or you're not going to abandon me, or you're not going to reject me, right? So always putting others' needs first. And it is this, you're going to be challenged by this, because the healthy thing is that to have boundaries. And it's interesting for some of us, like for me, guilt came up. It was like, I love you and I want this. Like, can
And
I?
it's not a but.
Yeah.
I can love my kids very much and say, this painting time, this journaling time, this quiet time is for me. And
Yes.
if you want me to be nice today, I need you to just leave me alone for a hot minute.
Yes. Yeah. And in some cases, you might be able to, and again, it's totally up to you, because this is your time. For me, one of the ways around that was I invited them into art time. Now it was art time, but you do your thing, I'm going to do my thing. You can be here if you want to make art with me. And a lot of times what would happen is either yes, they want to, and they would enjoy the time, and a lot of times they were like, this is boring, I want to go do something else. And so it was clear that the way it worked for me was just like, you're welcome to join. I'm not going to help you. You can't use my supplies. You use yours. Like, this is my space, but you are welcome to um, do a similar activity with me here if you're called to do it. But they were never forced to. And so that's kind of how I worked around that. That might not work for everybody.
And see, I do that. However, it has to be separate from my own individual time.
Got it. Yep.
Because I found that when I showed up, especially on live for my 365, and my kids are like trying to touch my paints and trying to grab my paintings and things, I'm on a live and I'm
Yeah.
overwhelmed. Like
Yes.
it's not the time. I have to keep it separate. And
Yeah.
but there's other times that when my focus, if my I've just kind of decided if my children are going to join me in something, we have to either be focused on the activity together, or I have to be focused on them. Because if I'm trying to take that sacred time from my soul and enjoy it for myself, and I have a million other distractions, it's not a sacred time. And
Yes.
and that's when I feel the frustration around it. So when I'm logging it and I see the frustration, I can now, but the whole point of it though is showing up for yourself every day. You learn those things.
And it trains other people, believe it or not. It kind of trains them. So I've been doing it for years now, where it's known this is the time that mommy's doing art, and I get that space. People are like, oh, we want to watch a movie, and I'm like, I've got to do my art first. And they're like, okay, it's not pushback, it's not a fight, there is no but what about. It's like, oh cool, mom's got to do that first, then we're doing this. So over time, sort of trained people that this is what's happening. And it was a struggle in the beginning, I'm not going to lie, because I think it's just, you're establishing something, and if you're taking it seriously and this is something that you're really like getting into, it's going to take a minute before people are fully on board with what's happening. But I will say that after, gosh, we're been doing this consistently since 2019. It's a known. Oh, you're going to do art time? Okay, cool. And now people come in and they'll sit down, because I do it at the dining room table, and people will come in and sit down and join, but it's not a talking thing. They're doing their thing, I'm doing mine. You're more than welcome to do your thing around me. But it's known, and nobody, I don't have the struggle anymore. Now my husband, like, he fills my water for me and he puts it on the table, and like if he's around as I'm cleaning up, he'll like grab my paints and wash the little paint tray, which is so sweet. But it's not, it's not required or expected. It's just, now that's part of it, that's part of life now. And he's got his thing, he loves to do bonsai, that's his, like, him time. And so, what's happened and evolved over the years is, as we've sort of created these spaces for ourselves, we find that we're supporting each other in it. And so it's like, oh, here's some wire for your bonsai. And, oh, I found this, these paints that you loved, or, there's this reciprocal energy of supporting, having that healthy you time. And my kids have that for themselves too. It's important, I think, that especially when you're doing something where you're trying to connect with yourself, you really do, like you're saying, you need that space. And I think that if you want to foster that in your family, if you want to foster that in your children, you have to model it first.
Yep.
And so what you're doing right now, and you're establishing boundaries in space, sometimes it doesn't feel good. You feel, for me, you feel a little guilty, like, this is mine. No, you can't touch that. You can't play with it. This is my paper. There's your paper, right? Like, have that boundary. But you're teaching boundaries, you're modeling boundaries, and you're giving permission for them to honor themselves as they get older.
What I really love about this is that I'm setting an individual boundary here. And the podcast episode that just went out at the time of this recording, this podcast episode just went out last week. I talked about how boundaries only upset the people that don't respect them.
Yes.
If the people eventually understand that, hey, this is my boundary and I'm going to hold to it. I'm going to stand to this. This is my time for me. And my kids now know that time is when I have my coffee in the morning. I need that time in the morning to just feel grounded, feel connected to my home, feel connected to my soul. If I don't have that time in the morning, my whole day feels off. But it's a boundary that I'm setting. And over time, it becomes easier. And I think people think, this is me assuming what people think, if you set a boundary, you're pushing people away, because that's what it feels like at first.
I can't remember where I heard this quote, but I absolutely love it. And it is, boundaries, when you set boundaries, you're showing people how to love you.
Yes.
And I love that.
And it's not, I don't set boundaries to push you away. I set boundaries so the people that love me and respect me, I can have a better relationship with them.
Yes.
And how you were explaining this boundaries thing with your family is, you guys each have that individual time where you set boundaries around being an individual person, because that's who we are. We're an individual being that deserves to flourish in our own ways, and everybody's ways are going to look different. And we're not going to, like, if someone were to come in and say, like, your hobby is not important, so you don't get that time anymore, I would give them the boot so freaking fast. And so I don't do that. I don't approach that mentality with anybody else. If you like video games, that's your business. You enjoy those video games. You do that time, you take that time, but you set boundaries with yourself and how you show up for it. Like, for me, I could sit and read all day long, but that's the boundary for me, is sometimes I have to set a timer, because I can get so absorbed in it that it then becomes too focused. And anyways, what I'm getting at is, if you set the boundary and say, this is the time that I need for myself, your family actually starts to feel more whole.
Well, you are a better person. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but you're kind of a better person for giving yourself that time, because it's a reboot. And again, it doesn't matter what the activity is, you're connecting with yourself. You're connecting with the inner child. It's, what do you need? And we have to realize there's a lot of talk about inner child work. I love inner child work. I love helping people do inner child work, but there's not just an inner child, there's also the inner parent.
Yep.
And that's who comes in to create those boundaries for this child and give the safe space. Say, no, this time is for you. And a lot of us have healing we need to do about feeling like we didn't get that for some reason in our actual childhood. And we're still trying to get it. And I really want people to understand that need is always going to be asked to be fulfilled. And until we start fulfilling it, that it acts like it's going to act out, just like children do when they don't get what they need, right? They act out. It's, if a child needs attention and they don't feel like they're getting the attention, they'll go to negative attention, because at least it's attention. Our inner child will do the same. We will start misbehaving in some way because our needs aren't getting met. you will be a better person when you start giving yourself permission to meet your own needs. And even if it starts with a little bit of time consistently is going, like you said, you're going to see a difference in, you're going to see a difference not only in what you're working on, that's kind of the reward, if you will, like your skills improve or you have something to show for it, but you're also going to see improvement in your outlook. You're going to see an improvement in your attitude. You're going to see an improvement of how you relate with other people and feeling like you have a greater capacity to meet their needs. It's going to be easier to do it because you are consistently giving yourself that time and attention that's required from you.
And I think it's like a catalyst to improving other areas of your life too. Like you show up. So for me, the Soul 365, I'm showing up for my art every day. That's what it is. That's what it always intended to be. But because I'm now trusting the fact that I can do what I say I'm going to do, and that I set these boundaries around, like for me right now, I think I'll find my time for it. But right now it doesn't matter what time of day I'm getting it done as long as I get it done. I'll
Yep.
find my time. I found that I don't like doing it at night because I'm too exhausted. I'd rather pour my good energy into it instead of like it being the one last thing I have to do. But regardless, if you show up for that thing every day and you start to trust that you can achieve something that you set your mind to, you start to trust yourself a little bit more. And then it's a catalyst into, okay, now I feel like I'm an artist because I'm painting every day. Okay, now how else can I show up and improve my life? Maybe I can go to the gym every day. Maybe I can just drink some water every day. Like
Yep.
simple things like that, you start to believe in yourself a little bit more. You start to trust yourself a little bit more. But it doesn't happen unless you just take that step to actually show up. Even if your step, you use the diving board analogy earlier. If the first step is just climbing that first rung on the ladder to get up to the diving board, you're building up the confidence to actually do it because you're showing up for yourself in a way that then when you get to the top, it's not as terrifying because you slowly made your way up there and worked through the fear on your way up. Maybe
That's right.
it's analogy. I don't know, but it works.
It does. It does. I mean, absolutely. I think that one of the things that I had to overcome in my own psyche about the things I was telling myself is um, I felt like I had a consistency issue in the
Yep.
past. And when you can commit, and this is for me, art is fun time, art is happy time, right? Art is uh, a joy to show up for. And yet I struggled to show up for it consistently in the past. When I finally started showing up consistently to it, it made me realize I don't have a consistency issue. It's not. I mean, it's maybe a resistance that I'm having because there's
Ooh.
something I'm telling myself, but I don't have a consistency issue. And then it did trickle in to other areas. I know one little silly one was dry brushing. Dry brushing is so good for your lymphatic system, and I'm all about like how I can help myself in natural ways. And
You're
um,
talking about like an exfoliation technique, I think. When you said dry brushing, my brain went to a dry paintbrush. Like,
yes, no. That's so funny. Yes, dry brushing isn't a painting technique. I'm talking about moving your lymphatic drainage system. And one of the ways you can do that is by using something called a dry brush, where you're brushing your skin. And I do it every night before I get into the bath. But I had a hard time showing up for that because again, it wasn't routine yet. And I hadn't habit stacked it. And habit stacking, we kind of touched on before, is like a key. If you need to introduce something new, you don't have a consistency issue. You have a sort of, you need to marry it to something that you already do consistently. Like every night I take a bath, it's just part of my relaxation ritual. So if I dry brush before that, it's like the work, and then it's like eating dinner, and then I get dessert. And now dry brushing is one of those things where if I don't do it, I feel weird
yeah.
because I consistently do it. So really, what I was sort of berating myself in a way in the past, where I was saying, I have consistency issues. Now, here's the problem: you're programming yourself when you do that. When you tell yourself a story enough times, you are actually convincing yourself that it's true. and you will behave as if it is true because you're programming it. Once you How do you break that program? Well, you need to acknowledge and look for evidence of where it's not true. And for me, showing up to the art consistently, because I was enjoying it, it was easy to show up consistently. And then I needed a limit. So I can't do things arbitrarily. I need a limit. So right now, my current limit is this sketchbook has to get filled. I want to fill it up as fast as I can. So every day, working on a page because I want to fill up this whole sketchbook. I needed limits to work within. So for me, if the Soul 365 challenge had been around, that would have been great. I had that 100-day art challenge. That was the limit. It wasn't, I didn't have to do this forever indefinitely. I don't know why there was a resistance to showing up like that. But I was like, 100 days is doable. I can show up for 100 days. And that's the trick, right? Is like, if you do something enough, pretty soon it's like, I feel weird when I'm not doing it.
Yep.
And that's kind of how you get over that hump. So putting limits on yourself, and artists and limits actually work really well together, specifically in art. I'm sure it works in other areas, but whenever I have limited something in my art, I've produced better art. So for an example, I'm looking at the art I created last night. The limit was the color palette and the medium.
Oh,
so
cool.
I'm using gouache, and it was 3 colors, and I love it. I look at it and I'm like, oh, it's exactly what I wanted it to be. When I didn't limit my color palette, I'd have rainbowitis because I absolutely love color, and if I want to be Lisa Frank, or if I want that to be my style, cool, right? It's your style. But for me, it wasn't quite doing it for me. It wasn't hitting that aesthetic I wanted to hit. So I find that when you have a limit, like in this notebook, or the sketchbook rather, I set up a color palette for that. This is the unique thing for this sketchbook, is there is a color palette already set, can't work outside of it. And it's these specific gouache paints. So I'm using those. Now I cheat a little and use other gouache, but it's all gouache. But I mean, like the very first page I did here is ugly, but it's like, this is it. These are the colors. And I look at it, I'm like, that's kind of rainbowy, Therese, but still there are certain tone and hue and saturation, all that stuff kind of kicks in. We as artists do really well with confined limits. In fact, it's when you have everything available to you, it's a little overwhelming. But if you're like, you only get a pencil and a piece of paper, suddenly you're making magic.
As you talk, I keep thinking of different resources I have. Can I just
Yes, please.
set up camp here for just a second and share some resources? Okay, both of these I found on Amazon. I'm not an affiliate for them. Maybe I should if I'm going to promote them. But either way, there's this manifestation journal. It's a law of attraction planner, and it's beautiful. It's got all of the astrology signs on it and everything. But inside, and this is when you were talking about your thoughts and how they impact you. Like your thoughts become what you do. There's a quote by Gandhi. This one's referenced to Gandhi, and it's on the very front cover of this journal. And it says, keep your thoughts positive because thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habit. Keep your habits positive because your habits become your values. Keep your values positive because your value becomes your destiny.
Absolutely. That's it. He's showing you what becomes of your life. And notice where it starts. It always starts with your thoughts. So when I am working with people as a self-empowerment coach, guess where we're hanging out a lot of the time? We're looking at your mindset. We're looking at what are the thoughts that you are, what's your belief system about this? Because one of the things about human beings is we will work to prove our beliefs true. We will look for evidence that our beliefs are true, and we will work to prove ourselves right. We're never working to kind of get better like we think we are. We're working to prove ourselves right about something. So if you have a growth mindset like you do, Mandy, you have a growth mindset, and your belief is that I can overcome not showing up for myself by setting these goals and these limits and maybe boundaries, like 365 days. There's the limit, right? Show up consistently for that. I win. You're going to work to prove yourself right,
Yep.
because that is your mindset around it. Now, if we go back to an old mindset that I had to erase, which is I'm not consistent, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to work to show that even your 365-day program doesn't work, because you know what? I'm not consistent. I'm working to prove myself right, not to prove your system right, because our mindset, our belief about the beliefs we hold are literally how we're choosing to live our life. So when you want to create a change, when you want something to shift, when you've got to get clear about the thoughts and the stories you are telling yourself about your life, because those are sort of the gatekeepers. It's sort of the filter, if you will, that we're putting on our reality, and we're going to work to prove that true, even if it's not in our favor. That's the sad part, is that even if this belief doesn't serve you or help you, and you really wish you could change it, until you address that, you're going to try to prove it to be the truth.
Well, mindset is really powerful. There's this story about these brothers, right? I don't know, they're twins or something. And they grew up in this really, like, I don't know if they grew up in foster system. I don't even know if it's a real story, but these twins, the story of it is that they grew up in this like poverty stricken foster care system. They didn't have a value system established as children. They had to overcome it in their own ways. And one of the brothers grew up to be a criminal, and he said, well, have you seen my background? What else, what other options were there? And then the other brother is wildly successful, and he said, well, did you see my background? What other options were there? And it's like, you get to pick what you do with it. There's a lyric right now that's really resonating with me, and it's from The Greatest Showman, and it's, we can live in a world that we design. What do you want for your life? How are you going to show up for it? Do you believe you can do it? Because if you're always like, yeah, I want this thing. Oh, but that's not for me. That could never happen to me. Why not?
Yes.
Show up and
There,
do the thing.
what I'm hearing there is the difference between victim mentality and creator mentality. And
Yep.
it is a choice. Either when I'm working with people and we're sort of working with the energetics around the thought process, there's two general ways of seeing the world. And we're mostly trained in the first one, and that is the outside world affects me. That's a victim mentality. I have no control over what's happening. Whatever the outside world does to me, it affects my life and the outcomes I receive. And we are actually, as a society, sort of trained to think like that, because it serves people who wish to control and have that sort of, if everybody was in a creator mentality, it would be a very different world, because there wouldn't be a limit. There is no limits. Nothing's stopping you. Nothing is preventing you from becoming the person you want to be, other than this, right? Other than the thoughts. So it serves, if you're living in a control structure, it serves to have that belief that the outside world affects you and you can't control it. When you switch it and you're coming from an internal state, this is where the idea of manifesting comes in, because this means the internal world comes first and I affect the external world. And in what you're starting to see the world as is a mirror to what's going on inside of you. And that's the area that you absolutely have domain. You have sovereignty here. It is in your hands. Everything is possible based on what permission you are giving to yourself, based on whether or not you see yourself as a victim of life or as the creator of it. And to become the creator of it also means that we have to take a lot of responsibility for what's happening in our life. We can't be the victim and create. We must be responsible for what we're experiencing. And this is can be hard for some people, because there are awful things that happen in our life that are not our choice, that they're not happening through our own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where it can get really tough for people. And I say this is where you would find help in having a guide, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach, whether it's a group program where you can get understanding, kind of go deeper into it, because everybody's life has these subtleties that have to be addressed. But in general, I'm saying that when you take on that I'm a creator being and I have the power to create the life I desire, you are empowering yourself to such a degree. And it does require responsibility. That's where I'm saying the story I was telling myself, there's the responsibility. I'm not consistent or whatever that was, right? So the responsibility was on me, that it was how I was approaching it, viewing it, and thinking about it that was creating it. But the beautiful thing is that once I have taken the responsibility for that, I also now have the power to change it, and I have the power to see it differently. And that's why I wouldn't trade the viewpoint of being a creator being. I'd rather take responsibility for everything coming in, because now I've empowered myself to create the shifts, and the things that happened because of somebody else's behavior. I'm not excusing it or blaming myself for it, but I'm saying that gets to be in the past now.
Yeah.
I get to heal now. Because I'm in charge. So I have the power to even heal that. I have the power to recover, and I have the power to make new choices that are unaffected by this, right? It's the building blocks of my new story. And I wouldn't even, to some degree, trade it. There's hard things that have happened in my life, and I wouldn't necessarily trade it, because look at who I am today.
Yep.
Look at what I have. I'm so proud of the choices I've made. Not every choice was great, but every choice got me here, and I'm more awake and aware. I feel more empowered. I feel like I can claim that I'm a professional artist, that I can overcome this limiting belief that I should have gotten this great art degree that in my head is like everything, right? Like this whole story about something I know nothing about because I haven't been through the experience. But my mind wants to build it up as like, oh, you would have like walked out of there and you would be the next so and so, right? Not necessarily true. But it's the story I've told myself. But I also now get to overcome that and say, you know what? It just wasn't the path I was supposed to be on. I was supposed to learn in a different way. I was supposed to absorb and create my own curriculum. And I'm doing it now. And it feels amazing. And I get to learn what I want to learn, not what I'm told to learn.
Yep.
Right. And it's a new story, very empowering. And it allows me to show up in life the way that I feel the most inspired to show up as.
I really love that. And I think this is a perfect segue into my final question. And I think we can probably keep it super simple because this is a bit of a longer episode, which I love. But let's just say someone's made it all the way through this podcast and all of these things, they resonate with them and they are ready to start taking a little bit more charge of their life. What do you think the first step is?
This is a hard question. Hmm. So it's a combination between acceptance and appreciation, because in order to create the change you desire, you have to accept what is right now and make it okay. And that's sometimes easier to say than do. But the power of acceptance means it's like, imagine you're handing me a glass of water. I cannot do anything with this water until I accept it, until I bring it into my own hand. Now I can dump it out, I can drink it, I can throw it over my shoulder. I have this power now. Acceptance is such a key. So wherever I've been, it's not about judging it. It's really accepting it. It's like, okay, that was a part of my journey. It got me here to this moment where I have this choice now to accept if I'm going to move forward or remain the same. And then I say the other part is appreciation, because I'm like, I don't know why it's making me emotional, but so often we get this feeling that we need to fix something, that you're not okay with what you are or what you've done. You got to fix it. You got to change it. And even like when we're talking about therapy or coaching, that can sometimes feel like we're implying that you could be better than who you are. I think in order to start anything, you need to appreciate who you are, right? Even if you want to improve, appreciate that you have that awareness. I want to improve. I want to change something. I want to give myself more me time. I want to give myself permission to be who I want to be. We can take a moment to celebrate that and like give ourselves a little hug and just be like, thank you. Thank you for showing up. I think that's a great way to start anything that you're trying to change, is to recognize that you're trying to take your power back in some way and improve your life, and that you appreciate yourself for this now moment, who you are right now, and that awareness that you're seeking, that both can coexist, that you can be absolutely appreciative of what is here now, and then also excited about what can I become.
I love that your first step when you asked this question, it wasn't an action per se. It's a mindset. Like
Mhm.
you're like, okay, yeah, cool. I'm ready to take charge. I'm ready to like do these things for my life. And I think so often someone's looking for something tangible to hold on to. Like,
Mhm.
tell me my first step. Like, what do I need to do? Okay, the first thing you have to do is calm down a little and and be just take a minute to take stock of your life and breathe, find gratitude where you can, and just try to find a way to be 1% better. Lean into it 1% better every day. That's Atomic Habits by James Clear, by the way. That's your
Love
unsolicited
Atomic Habits.
unsolicited book recommendation again. Atomic
I
Habits.
thumbs up on that one. Yes. So
It's
and the
1%
question
better.
is, who is it all for? I
Mhm.
hope the answer is you. When you answer that question, what am I doing this for? I hope it's you.
Oh my God, I just love you so much. I just want to like lean through the computer and give you a big fat hug and kiss because you were just so fantastic. Thank you
Oh, thank
so,
you.
so much for being on this podcast and for sharing your love and your light and your energy because it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm going to share all of this information in the show notes, but just real quick, if someone wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do it?
Yeah. So if you want to get in contact with me and see all that I'm offering, because I do offer quite a bit, I would recommend going to my website, which is blythestarlight.com. So Blythe is an old English word for joy or
Oh, beautiful.
joyful.
Yeah.
So it's like joyful starlight, but Blythe, starlight.com. And everything I offer is there. I'm also going to share my links with Mandy, where you can go to my link tree and see all of the offerings. Like for right now, I'm really excited. I just did my first live meditation event on Insight Timer. I'm a meditation teacher on Insight Timer, the app, and it's so much fun to meet with people there. And because I work on mindset, because I'm working on like self empowerment, a lot of the meditations I offer actually go hand in hand with how I coach. So a lot of my meditations are actually inspired by clients who are like, I really want to work on this. And I'm like, let me make you a meditation and I'll put it over there. So it's
Wow.
a way to engage with me for free, and have me help you and guide you on your own self empowerment journey. And you bet if you have something that you're trying to work on and you're like, I just need help with overcoming this mindset, I'd love for you to reach out to me, share with me what you're working on, and let me inspire you and you inspire me, because I'm always looking for ways that I can help people to develop that sense of like self empowerment, self sovereignty, love, and acceptance, because it's through love that you're going to move forward. It's the criticism that holds us back. It's love that will take you forward. So I'd love to help you on that journey.
I just love you. I'm gonna put all of your
Oh, you
links.
too.
I'm gonna put all of your links in the show notes where everybody can find them, everybody can access them. They don't have to worry about the spelling. And we learned with
Yeah,
the
I know the
Instagram.
spelling throws people off, but
Well,
I
the
appreciate that.
Instagram account, I think you had sent it to me, and you're like,
Oh my gosh.
it's actually
Yes.
periods.
Yeah. So I have two Instagram accounts. I have one for Blythe Starlight brand, which is where the coaching and the more the jewelry and stuff are over there. But I have my original account used to be Blythe Starlight, and I changed it to Star Thistle and Quartz for my art. And I couldn't remember how I wrote that handle, and so I kept sending it to Mandy. I'm like, I think it's there, and she's like, finally, she looked it up on her own, and she was like, you spelled that wrong, and I'm like, oh my god, oh my god. All right, thank you for letting me know how I made my own handle. So now I'll never forget. Thank you, man.
It's actually periods, not hyphens. Just
Periods,
so
not
you're aware.
dashes. Yes, but if you want to see my art journey every day, I will post at the end of my little art session what I'm working on, and it's just in my stories usually. So it's like if you go to my stories, you'll see, hey, what was Therese working on tonight as I was giving myself me time. And I'm going to get back to filming myself while I paint, but I find it really distracting. I feel
Yes.
like people are watching, and I do better when I with experimenting where it's like no one has to know if I made this mistake. No one has to know if it turned into a blob. But honestly, at the end of it, usually I'm just so excited I showed up that I end up sharing what I'm working on. So
Yeah. And I can relate to that. I've been doing my paintings on lives, and there's times where I'm like, I am not feeling social enough for this, because you almost feel like you have to put on a presentation. Like I'm
you
like,
really do.
I don't know if my lives are entertaining enough for people. And I found
Yeah.
that I don't mind so much I'll show up with no makeup on, I'll show up in my jammies. I don't care how I look. It's that I want to show up in a way that's like genuine. And I'm not always going to be peppy every day, but as long as I show up in some way, and I'm giving myself permission. My Soul 365 was never to show up and, I mean, I was like, yeah, I can paint on lives to do it, but that was never the intention. It's meant to be for me to paint every day.
You
And
know
so
what the irony is? I absolutely get what you're saying. And the flip side of it is I love to watch artists work. I love it. Like I'll be like, oh, like, oh, that's how you do it. Oh my gosh. So good. So I find it very educational, even when people do it, which is so funny because again, on the other side, it's like very like you feel like you're under a microscope a little bit.
mhm.
And then on the other side, it's just usually people really enjoy that. So I'm sure that's another self-limiting belief I could work through to get back to doing it.
All right. Well, I just love you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Mandy. This has been such a pleasure.